1. It all started when I began a new job as a lifeguard and swim instructor at a university pool. The first person I ever shared a shift with was a guy named Harry. He was fairly odd, quite socially awkward, and had a quirky sense of humor. However, after the first couple of weeks of work, Harry started to strike up some pretty deep conversations with me. He asked me a lot of personal information about my family, how I grew up, what I enjoy, my relationship with my now husband. This didn't strike me as particularly odd, as I'm a very extroverted social human, and I love talking to people about my life. His questions started to have a lot more depth as he began asking me deep questions about the meaning of life, my faith, and my beliefs. I'm a Christian, so I saw this as a great opportunity to explain what I believe and why. Harry began to open up about his family life in a way that made me uncomfortable. He described his parents in a way that made me feel like he had no emotional connection to them, even though they were very clearly emotionally connected to him. He would describe his mother as being passive and stupid, unwilling to stand up for herself, and his father as living in fear by over-controlling Harry's actions. As time went on, the way he talked got more extreme. He kept talking about how he was different from everyone and how he was a monster. A few times after our late-night shifts, he would drive me home to my house. I often walked, but I took him up on his offers to drive when I could. He would talk to me a lot during our shifts, which as it is, isn't the smartest thing to do as a lifeguard. One time a lady hopped into the deep end who didn't know how to swim. I saw it and ran to the scene, but he just watched. I asked him later why he didn't come and help me, but he shrugged it off like it wasn't a big deal. He also began to self-disclose a lot of personal information that I felt like we weren't at the right level of friendship for. He told me he was a virgin, and then told me he wanted to have sex so he knew how to feel. He texted me when he lost his virginity, without any protection by the way, and said that he gave a girl pleasure and that he didn't feel anything, and just finished on his own. A few weeks into his relationship with this girl, he texted me saying that he thought he had AIDS, which he didn't have. All of this information might seem like unnecessary details, I know, but they are details that are embedded in my mind that make me wonder how I could have missed some of the signs. Harry continued to text me about his emotions and lack of empathy for others. He also talked about his plan to leave his parents, he lived at home, and move to Australia. He had several $1,000s saved up, which he occasionally made me think he would give to me. In a conversation once, he casually mentioned, "I don't know what to do with my money." And he later went, "Man, I could just give it all to you." He said it half joking and half serious, but with a tone that made me wonder if he understood the gravity of what he was saying. I was an engaged college student trying to pay for a wedding and live on more than just my rent every month. He knew that very well, but lorded his money over me without a thought that that might be a cruel thing to do. He continuously talked to me about an empty property that he had the keys to, and how he liked to take his friends there to explore the house. I didn't think much of it, but I started to get a really weird feeling about the things he was telling me. I was open with my fiancé about the texts he was sending me, and the types of questions he was asking me. We both agreed it wasn't comfortable for either of us. He continued to text me late at night, saying that I was one of his only friends. He often talked about his mental health and how he wanted to end things. He also talked about how smart he was, that he was at genius level of intelligence, and everyone was stupid and empathetic. Many of our conversations circulated around these topics, as well as his sex life, and some of the dumb decisions he was making at risk to his own health and others. The turning point happened one night at 1 a.m. or so, when he sent me a text asking a hypothetical question that I knew wasn't hypothetical. He said, "If I drive over and knock on your door, will you say, 'Harry, it's too late, go home,' or will you either willingly let me into your house or exit your house to take on the world with me?" I was confused and asked him to elaborate. And he said that he had the keys to this house and asked if I wanted to explore it with him. It should be noted that the house was in a very sketchy part of town. I said no, and told him that I wouldn't be very comfortable doing that with anyone, especially on that side of town. However, I got the niggling feeling that he was at my door, and sure enough, when I looked out my window, I saw him walking back to his vehicle from my doorstep. That was the most distinctive moment that I thought to myself, he might be a stalker. I had a panic attack and called my fiancé, we were long distance, and pulled my roommate into my room so that I could explain the situation to them. In the following weeks, Harry continued to text me daily, if not hourly, asking me where I was and if we could meet up somewhere. I often lied or made up excuses as to why I couldn't. Eventually, he said he would be leaving for Australia and was planning on deleting all social media. He asked me for my email address and any other possible way of staying in touch with him, which I very guiltily did not give him. Finally, he left. I felt so much relief, and I felt like I wasn't being watched anymore, or had to worry about something happening to me. It took me a really long time to acknowledge that he was a stalker. I decided to ask some female coworkers about him, especially ones I heard were closer to him. The first thing I noticed was that there was a type. We were all blonde, curvy, and strong-willed women, and we all had the same kinds of interactions with him. We would listen to him and have conversations with him, and he would text us late at night. Later I brought up his stalkerish tendencies to a coworker who had similar experiences, and she mentioned that the house he kept referring to was where he would take women to have sex with them. There were many moments I wondered if he might be a sociopath, possibly higher functioning, or had some other mental health issues going on besides major depression. He was isolated as a child in a very strict religious environment and wasn't allowed to go anywhere. Anyways, maybe that's way too much information, but I needed a place to vent with people who understand what it feels like to be stalked. It might not be a very extreme example, but it haunts me to this day. This all happened about exactly a year ago. 2. So to start off, before I moved away for work, I used to be heavily involved in the art scene in my old city, especially small theatrical type gigs. When you run in those circles, you see and interact with the same people a lot. Broadly, this was fine, and that's how I met plenty of my best friends. This is a story about a dude I did 4 shows with, and God was he a weird one. Enter Eric. We're both involved in a local production, and our characters share a ton of scenes, so predictably, we spend a lot of time together and get pretty friendly, sending each other memes, venting about annoyances over Messenger, typical friend stuff. I'm a touchy-feely person, so the occasional hug when we hadn't seen each other in a while was par for the course. I did the same to all of my other friends too, so I didn't think anything was weird about it. The same happened when he started asking me to get coffee before rehearsal. I love caffeine, I love conversation. Sounds good to me. Little did I know is that to him, the simple act of getting coffee and hugging now meant we were dating. He hadn't asked me out, hadn't used the word date or boyfriend, girlfriend, or any of that. I was definitely not in the room for this decision. He just decided I was his girlfriend. He also began to craft some off-the-wall narrative that we were in love, which he kept texting our mutual friend Max about. When on Halloween he kept telling me how sexy my costume was, I was a little confused. Generally, friends don't talk like that, but I brushed it off. I chalked it up to the fact that it involved a dress and fishnets, figured it was whatever, until he randomly kissed me. Because I didn't know the whole girlfriend thing yet, I didn't mind it too much. He was a handsome enough guy and we were friends. I wasn't opposed to having a fling with him, which is what he acted to me like he wanted. We made out a few times, kept making up inside jokes, and it more or less seemed chill. That was all I'd signed up for, and I told him as much. Then he starts getting creepy. He starts pressuring me to get into his car with him at night to cuddle. Something about him being so focused on wanting me alone at night gives me a weird vibe I can't explain, and I keep declining. I start to wonder if he has the wrong idea, so we get coffee again, and at some point I mention that I can't be his girlfriend. I wish I could say it ended there. He also starts making a big deal about me being the only girl younger than him he's ever wanted. Eric is 6 months older than me, and we're both in our mid-20s. Weird then, weirder with hindsight. He follows it up by saying he still has a high libido and really wants to bone. Meanwhile, he is still obsessively texting Max about how in love with me he is, and thinking we have a deep connection, which, again, mostly consists of memes and caffeine. All the while, he says jack shit to me about this. When we were in shared places, like rehearsals, and I didn't give him my full attention or drop whatever I was doing, like my literal goddamn lines, and pay attention to me, He'd do increasingly dramatic things like start randomly crying or other dramatic nonsense. The next time we try to talk about this, he keeps insisting I played with his heart. I try to insist I had no intention of playing him, that I've told him multiple times we weren't dating, and that I'm honestly not sure what I did. It ends in a rant about random things I'd done months ago that he apparently never stopped being annoyed about. He pretty much totally stops talking to me after that, being cordial at rehearsals, which is frankly a relief. While getting coffee with Max near closing night one week, she shows me all his dramatic texts, all his weird confessions of us being in love. I show her my own text history, showing that Eric literally never clued me in about our apparent whirlwind romance. She gives me some pleasant closure by showing me one text about our last weird conversation, wherein Eric said my refusal to apologize for not stopping mid-rehearsal to hug him months earlier had made him lose all feelings for me. That's more or less where my weird fantasy not romance with him ends. But I don't feel good knowing that after a bunch of other people, including me, left the cast party, he apparently hooked up with 3 19-year-olds at once. So much for thinking a woman 6 months younger than you was too young, huh, dude? Eric, you lunatic living in your own world. Let's not meet again. 3. These events happened over several months in 2016, when me and my sister, then 16 and 14, first moved into our most recent apartment complex with our mother. We now call it the apartment complex from hell because there were many incidents like this. Admittedly, we were still into the hoverboard craze then, and would ride them around. This is how we met Savannah. She was our age and lived in the building. She asked to hang out, and we were happy to hopefully make new friends, so we said yes. We hung out outside the apartment complex at a little park area. It got dark, and we started making up ghost stories. Turns out she liked creepy paranormal stuff like we did. Note, I did not actually believe in this stuff and still don't. Every time I reference the paranormal, it is hyperbole. As we were walking home, the light in one of the apartment hallways flickered, and I joked and said it was a spirit trying to communicate with us. Savannah made up a flash once for yes, twice for no system to communicate with the spirit, and we messed around a bit. We thought it was just harmless fun. The next day she runs over to us excited. She informs us that the spirit we had met last night told her its name, it was Kieran, and that it meant light. So it all made perfect sense now. We asked her how she knew, and she said she went back later that night alone to talk to it. This was the first time it occurred to us that she might have really believed in this stuff. Our aunt had given us an old Ouija board as a joke the year before, and we thought Savannah might like it. Savannah lit up, and she said she would try and talk to Kieran. So we huddled in the hallway connecting the apartments and put our hands on the board. We kept getting random letters that didn't make sense, but soon Savannah's questions were directed to Kieran. We felt her moving the planchette and calling her out, but she got mad and said she'd prove it. She took her hand off the planchette and it no longer moved. She just huffed and insisted it wasn't her. Over the next few weeks we did mostly normal stuff with her, but she kept talking about the ghosts and Ouija boards until we broke down and played it again. This time we were introduced to a new ghost, Evan. We knew it was Savannah moving the planchette, but were curious about the story she was making, so let her follow through. Evan was a ghost, or demon, rather, about our age who wanted free from a greater demon controlling him. That greater demon's name, Kieran. Savannah's parents called her inside, and conveniently, Evan had to go too. He told us he'd protect us against Kieran, especially Savannah. Savannah commented on how cute that was for him to offer. A few days go by normally, but then Savannah's back to tell us she has a boyfriend. We are happy for her until she tells us his name is Evan. We're wondering what the hell she's talking about, and she explains that while sleeping over at another friend's house, something had tugged off her shorts while she slept. She'd woken up and heard Evan's voice. Then he'd visited her in her dreams and asked to date or something like that. She said yes, of course. We know she made up Evan, so we're kind of like, what is wrong with you? And we don't talk about the demon stuff anymore. Now, Savannah was extremely possessive over her friends. When she'd see us with someone else, she'd text us non-stop about why we hadn't invited her. We tried to keep our distance, but she lived on the ground floor and literally watched out her window, waiting for us to come outside. She'd latch onto us. We didn't know much about her home life, but she'd always seemed troubled. She had scars on her wrists and talked about running away from home. Her parents seemed all right, if rather strict and religious. We still hung out with her because we were worried, but were starting to feel weird about it. Worse, she'd randomly show up holding her hand out, saying Evan was holding her hand. She'd look at random things and laugh when no one was talking, because Evan had told her a joke. Once she made us feel her cheek where it was supposedly warm from Evan kissing her. It was not warm. One day my sister and I were bored from her talking to Evan on the Ouija board. She was still controlling the whole thing and wanted some fun. I texted my mom to call my phone from a blocked number and play creepy sounds. Looking back, this was one of the dumbest things I did, but at the time it was just for fun. My mom made the call, and I put it on speaker. Savannah is living for it, especially when my mom played a track from a scary movie about a ghost. My mom took it a step further and threw a banana off our third-story balcony for us to see. Savannah said it was a sign that Kieran was winning. We had no idea of the fire this would light in her. We were about to tell her it was a prank, but again her mom called her inside. She found us again the next day, and I came clean about the prank. She laughed and said there was no way we could have done that. I said no, my mom literally did it all. Well, Savannah had told her friend about it, who told her that yellow objects like the banana were a sign of the devil, and seeing them meant the devil was haunting you. This was all she talked about for a while, but since nothing else happened, she gradually forgot. Things went back to normal after a while, until Autumn moved in. Autumn and Savannah connected instantly because of their history with depression. Autumn was a few years younger than us, but had a lot more of a past. This included significant time spent in psychiatric facilities, and violence towards her classmates and family. Autumn claimed she heard demons talk to her at night, and just like that, the ghost stuff is started again. Savannah felt threatened by Autumn, and felt the need to one-up her with ghost stuff. She told her Evan was her ghost brother that looked out for her. I was like, hold on, you claimed he was your boyfriend. She giggled and said, that's gross, he's my brother. Her story had completely switched. Now she was dating another demon named Jacob, and they were engaged. She even showed us a ring to prove it. The next week or so was literally like a match between them to see who was the darkest and most involved in the spiritual world or whatever. They'd compare scars on their wrists and brag about cutting themselves and doing things like sneaking out in the night. In a move to one-up Autumn, Savannah drew a giant pentagram in the parking lot with chalk. Her parents found out, and she backed out and blamed it on Autumn. The next freaking day, people came to repave the parking lot. The pentagram is now buried under it forever. Literally. Savannah moved on to saying her friend had found Jacob's body and was going to put his spirit back inside it. Savannah continued to take advice from this friend, who fueled everything she did. Savannah now said the friend was teaching her witchcraft. We mostly avoided her at this point, but she'd ask us to do things like make holy water with her and summon her a familiar. From that point on, she insisted she was a fire witch, and walked around wearing all black and Halloween-like makeup on her face. She and Autumn frequently snuck out together, and occasionally we'd see cop cars at her house. My sister and I were avoiding them both, but now we'd get fiery texts from both of them if we hung out with other people, especially our guy friends. Once they saw us get home and stood in the parking lot pretending to be possessed. Autumn also cut off all her hair and claimed to have tried to kill her teacher. My sister and I knew it was bullshit, or at least we hoped. But Savannah took it so seriously. She'd go around telling neighbors of horrible crimes she'd committed or wanted to commit. She even told us when she'd first seen us outside with hoverboards, and she wished for them to blow up. One day we again saw the police come to her door, and the officers had jackets that said they were from the Juvenile Justice Department. Her mom pulled me, my sister, and our mom aside to explain what was going on. Apparently, 2 years before, they discovered Savannah talking with a man online. Her messages to him were hiring him to come literally kill her parents, after making threats of killing them a few days before. We were able to confirm the story after pet-sitting for them and finding court papers about it. We'd known she was on probation, but she'd always tell us different stories as to why. Savannah continued to beg us to hang out with her after that, even inviting herself to spend the night. We avoided her at all costs, but she'd follow us everywhere. It kind of died down when Autumn moved out, and Savannah moved with her family shortly after. Since then, she started doing service hours at horse stables and graduated high school. I really hope she's gotten happier and more stable. Autumn messaged my sister a few months ago asking to call her mom to confirm she was with us. She wasn't, and we later saw her with a 19-year-old dude. She's 14 now. Me and my sister and mom have moved as well. There were too many incidents in those apartments. Our new place is so quiet and peaceful. But to Savannah and Autumn, let's never meet again. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 474. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Okay, let's see, this is Monday this goes up. That'll be the 24th. This month's almost over already, okay. If all goes according to plan, I should have the Glitch Monthly up by Thursday. I plan to have already started working on it, so hopefully everything will be okay. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.